Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Fishing in the Midwest. Today I'm going to go in depth on frog fishing, types of frogs you should use, where to fish it, and how to fish it. Hope you guys stay tuned and enjoy our show. Now before I go in how to fish and where to fish, I want to talk about the frogs that we have here. You know, there's a large assortment of frogs out in the market nowadays. You've got the basic frogs that have a plastic around them that float and never sink. You've also got the plastic frogs that actually can sink if you don't reel them in. They actually work like a buzzbait or something like that. And this is a Outdoor Advantage boss frog right here, Texas rig with a 3/0 hook. And I fish each and every single one of these frogs in different conditions and different types of vegetation. You know, a couple of vegetations that we've got in certain lakes. We've got lily pads, we've got sparse vegetation, little patches of weeds that have come to the surface. You know, just about everything. We've got algae, we've got scum, and just sometimes working the frog out in open water can be really good, but you want to use the right frog in different situations. And first off, I'm going to talk about two of my favorite frogs, and that's basically the Spro bronze-eye frogs. They're very soft, they're fairly durable. After, you know, probably like the 20th fish, they'll start breaking apart, but that just shows how soft they are, and they can really catch fish. The two that I've got right here is the 65 and the Junior. The Junior is a little bit smaller, something I'd usually use when I'm fishing sparse vegetation, something those fish can get right up in there and grab it. Because when sparse vegetation, I don't need a whole lot of movement, a whole lot of noise or sound to get those fish going, because it's mainly water rather than lots of vegetation. So I'd usually work this in little holes and patches and stuff like that. And a really great frog, the Junior is. And then we step it up to the 65. The Spro 65 is a bigger frog, usually what I'd fish around lily pads, heavier cover, just, you know, over scum, because it makes a little bit more action. The head bobs a little bit more. And if you cut down the skirts, what I've done right here, it actually does the walk the dog motion, which you can later on throw out in the mope in the water. If there's some, you know, underwater mat or below grass down there that you don't want to get hung up in if you were to throw a popper or a walk the dog bait. And the last Spro we got right here is the King Daddy, one of my favorite ones out there as well. It's a very big bait, almost looks like something you use for muskie or pike, but this bait can be really effective if you're fishing really heavy cover. You know, let's say I'm fishing area where there's scum, lily pads, and just about any other type of cover. I'd keep this frog on all day and just work it across there. I'm you know, minusing out my chances of catching a little guy out of maybe a couple good ones. So I'm really upping my sizes to bigger fish when I'm throwing this frog, and I like to choose a black color because it shows up better over the blue sky. You know, it wouldn't make sense to throw something that's blue or something that's a light color, the color of the clouds, because when that fish looks up at it, he sees the sky and whatever's, you know, under the water, and he sees that black movement. He's going to see that and he's going to think it's something he can eat. And that leads into the colors that I like to choose. I like to stick with darker colors. If you notice, the Junior right here has a black belly, and this King Daddy is a full black. But I don't always throw black. I like to throw natural colors too. Clear water, sometimes in sparse vegetation, I'll throw a clearer color, a little bit clearer or lighter color. This right here is a yellow color. If you think in perspective, a bass were to eat a real frog has a white or tan belly. So you want to throw something a little bit more natural and clear water. And you know, we've got this frog right here, which is an Evergreen International skirted frog. Again, a great frog to work around sparse vegetation, not a whole lot of vegetation. It does a walk the dog motion with these little skirts on the side of them. I never try to trim down the skirts too much, but just enough to make, you know, usually when they manufacture it, it's a little bit over exaggerated, and I want to stick with something that's compact and those fish can just collapse in their mouth. You always want to make sure you're throwing the right frog. If the fish is missing, you know, let's say the 65, drop down to the Junior. You should hook them. And then lastly, you got the boss frog right here. These types of frogs are great for fishing around heavy cover, to the sides of lily pads. It's basically like a buzz bait that you can get deep, thick into the weeds. These little legs in here make a whole lot of motion. So we're going to go out in the lake and show you how to fish these frogs. We've got the Spro Junior tied on right now, and we're facing some cover over here. A little bit of flower buds, a little bit of thick leaves in there, and also some scum as well. And usually that's when I pull out the Junior, because there's not a whole lot of vegetation. There's a lot of water edge by there, a lot of grass down under. This fish will come right out of that grass and grab it. So I want a smaller frog that can be pretty compact. So I'm going to whip it out there, I always use braid. You know, no matter what type of cover I'm fishing, I'm always going to use braid. The lowest I'll go is usually 35, but I like to stick at 50. I'll even sometimes go to 70 if I'm fishing really heavy, thick muck with grass under. And the way I'm going to work this frog is just kind of pop it along, kind of like I would a popper, or try to work the walk the dog bait. And it just kind of bobs its head a little bit. And it's got a really, really unique action, kind of skeeting across the water like that. And it just gets those fish going. And sometimes you have to stop it, pause it, keep moving. You know, don't be afraid to use the erratic action. Fish will come up and they'll charge at it. These bass are very aggressive. They can move fast underwater, and they can really get those fish. Another good tip too is always to have a reel that has a high speed gear ratio. This is a 7-to-1 gear ratio, 7.0 to 1 gear ratio reel. This is the Shimano Corrado. It can hold a lot of braid on here, and it can really reel in those frogs fast. Let's say if I get a blow up, boom, right there, I can reel in that frog real quick, or to get another pitch and throw it right back in there and land that fish, because the fish will hit more than once, especially when you're fishing the topwater frog. And I like to switch, usually stick with a 7'2" rod. Some guys will throw a 7'3" heavy, but I like to stick with a 7'2" medium heavy, so I can get a little backbone on that fish, pull it out of there. If I'm fishing, again, really heavy cover, I'll be fishing like 75-pound braid with like a 7'3" heavy. And that's when I usually use my zombie rod. But this is a Powell Endurance 723 rod. Very nice, easy to use, balanced rod and reel setup. So we're going to go over there where there's a little bit sparse vegetation, show you how to fish this frog in open water and which one to use. So now we've kind of moved into an area where it's a little bit deeper. There's stalks of weeds coming up and just barely touching the surface of the water. And we've still got a little vegetation right on the corners and the edges of this bank over here. And we've tied on the Evergreen International skirted frog right here, which has the little lifelike movement of a frog or something like that. And it also has 4 little legs with them, 2 on the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to fish this frog just outside that weed edge. So we're not going to get too deep in there. Just kind of work it like we would the regular frog, but a little slower. So we kind of want that head to bob back and forth. As you can see, it's kind of walking the dog just a little bit. It's kind of going side to side. And it gets those fish going really good, you know. Again, you don't want to be throwing a regular walk the dog bait because it's got, 2 trebles on it, 3 trebles on it, depending on which one you're throwing. So you get a good fish and puts you right down in those weeds. Those trebles are just going to hook up to everything that fish pulls you down in. With this, there's only 2 hooks right here, as you can see, and that fish is probably going to have both of them in its mouth. And even if one does get snagged, with that 50-pound braid, you can pull it right out of there. We've got the boss frog tied on right now, and we've moved to a different area where there's some dragonflies hanging around, a little bit of insects, and not a whole lot of vegetation. And if you can look at that bait in the water, it doesn't exactly sink very fast because we've got a weightless rig. And we like that for a reason, because we want that frog to just skim across the water like that and have those legs paddle. So I'm going to show you how to fish this. I fish on the same type of equipment if I would floating frog, but usually with a 3/0 Yamagatsu hook. It's a little bit different fishing. Rather than stopping and starting it, I'm just actually going to reel this thing in like a buzz bait, maybe give it a pop or 2, slow it down maybe. And something that I like to do that a lot of other guys don't like to do is completely stop that frog from moving. Sometimes you can just, sometimes I like the straight up retrieve where you're just retrieving it like this and waiting for that fish to come up and hit, but sometimes I'll stop it right at the end of a weed edge. Just kind of pop it a little bit. It's kind of under that water, and when you pop it like that, it's almost like a popper. And you get that bait really moving. It's a little bit different action. It's not going to go too far down. You can still see the wake, the fish come up and hit it. Thanks for watching today's episode. And if you guys want to learn a little bit more about fishing the Midwest, tips, tricks, and techniques, go on www.fishingthemidwest.info. That's www.fishingthemidwest.info. See you guys next time.